Commissioner of Public Lands.
State parks.
State parks.
I guess they could be in charge of state parks.
Well, some people may confuse us with parks and think that we manage parks, but actually we don't. That's done by state parks.
Commissioner of Public Lands does something with public lands. I don't know.
The Commissioner of Public Lands is the Chief Executive Officer of DNR, which is the Department of Natural Resources, a 1,400 plus staffed agency which has multiple responsibilities as its mission.
I believe the state owns, controls, and manages a couple million acres of a variety of kinds of lands, a lot of forest lands.
The Commissioner of Public Lands is sort of the person overseeing all of the public lands and public resources in Washington.
Some of the lands have been set aside to generate revenues for schools.
At statehood, DNR and the state received over 3 million acres to use to support education.
So the Commissioner of Public Lands governs those and decides how those lands are going to be managed and toward what ends.
And there are two ways that revenue is generated to support schools. One of the principal ways is to offer for sale state timber.
What do they call it? Working forests.
And there's another way, and that is through leasing of lands, principally in eastern Washington, for grazing or for the production of both dry land or irrigated crops. Part of the revenue comes from the harvest of timber, part of it comes from agricultural commodities that are harvested off state land and all go to support education.
Tonight we look at a battle that's raging in the United States over an endangered bird. The northern spotted owl is said to be on the verge of extinction. Logging in the Pacific Northwest has almost eradicated its habitat. Environmentalists
We have a habitat conservation plan and have since the late 90s. That's an agreement between DNR and the state of Washington with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service about protecting endangered species. It was formulated to protect the northern spotted owl.
Ladies and gentlemen, this issue has been one which has bedeviled the people of the Pacific Northwest for some years now.
So if this bird and this habitat goes extinct, I think that it's a warning sign to us. If it's even threatened, it's a warning sign.
They say we have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Period. That doesn't say unless there's a spotted owl on this tree.
Timber workers and companies, the environmentalists, the Native Americans, the people who live in those areas who just wanted to see the controversy resolved so they could get on with their lives. Had this crisis been dealt with years ago, we might have a plan with a higher yield and with more environmentally protected areas.
We have roughly 1.4 million acres of forested landscape in western Washington that's within the range of the northern spotted owl. Roughly 52% of that acreage is currently committed to conservation. So these are forests that are set aside for habitat for the owl. Also serves as habitat for many other species, as you can imagine.
We are announcing a plan today which we believe will strengthen the long-term economic and environmental health of the Pacific Northwest and Northern California.
And in exchange for those acres of conservation, the agreement is really about operational certainty for forestry operations on the balance of those acres.
The plan provides an innovative approach to forest management to protect the environment and to produce a predictable and sustainable level of timber sales.
It's a great deal because we achieve for the people of the state of Washington conservation while we're also producing dollars to support school children. So it's a great agreement. In addition, we manage the state-owned aquatics lands, and that's another 2.6 million acres of bedlands of every major river and lake that was navigated as of statehood again in 1889. So there are leases that are pertinent to that property that we put out. that the state gets some revenue for. And the revenue mainly goes to support restoration, where there's an opportunity to improve habitat for fish. So that's our land management responsibility.
This year's wildfire season is off to a scorching start.
Massive wildfires in Washington, forcing evacuations, scorching thousands of acres. ABC's Clayton Sandell is on the scene in Spokane County.
More recently, I think people are understanding that DNR has major firefighting responsibilities. And indeed, we are the state's largest on-call fire department, and that's a big part of who we are and what we do. We have over 115 fire engines. We have 8 helicopters and numerous contract resources to deploy to protect 13 million acres of mostly forested land here in the state of Washington. So it's an enormous responsibility.
The flag at the landmark Space Needle in Seattle was lowered today to half-staff in honor of 3 firefighters who died yesterday in the battle against a wildfire in Washington state. More than 100 fires are burning uncontained across the West. The governor of Washington calls it an unprecedented cataclysm.
Of late, we've had these 2 record fire seasons, and we've been making do, if you will, with too little budget.
We have another 200 going into training today.
I've been approaching the legislature now for the past 4 years to garner more resources to be able to have enough firefighters to keep fires small and respond quickly. All you need to do is really go into these communities, both during a fire and after a fire, to understand how desperately people really want and need protection. It's too bad the legislature can't be on the fire line with us when we're over there protecting communities, or else they would more personally understand the crying need for fire protection. So we have a multitude of responsibilities. It's a very complex job, and it's very important in the state of Washington.